If they're under 24, does the kiddie tax apply? The kiddie tax applies to investment income. This is ordinary income distributed. It is not affected by the kiddie tax. Thank you for asking. It's a good question. Child 3 is younger by a long shot than the others, about 15 years from retirement, but really quite successful, and they have a business. Between all of their taxes, they're paying about 40%, and if they took it in beneficial form and took the money out a little every year, they're going to be paying that 40% on all the dollars they take out. They have a pretty good amount of wealth built up inside of retirement plans for themselves, so they said this $25,000 isn't that important to us. What's our option? And each of these is being talked to independently. The others don't know. So grandchild 5 and 6 could inherit if they stepped out of the way, similar to the child 2. One was a student with no income. The other one is active duty in the military in a hostile war zone, rendering almost all of his income tax-free. When they each added the $12,500 to their other earnings that they had, part-time jobs and the military pay, the tax bill came in between state and federal for both of them at about 14%. The parents could pay 40%, use that money to pay college. All of their tuition adjustments and deductions were phased out. They got no benefit from the tax code perspective, but this way, you give the money to grandchild 5 and he could pay his tuition. And the one in the middle, or the military one rather, he didn't get any college money. He said, let's just give it to him because he chose not to go to college. He could still have this money. But it's worthwhile to note there was also 2 stepchildren. Mrs. Smith's estate said, this goes in my bloodline. And she never really took those in as her own grandchildren. She left them out, which is typical. The family wasn't upset. But with a brief suggestion, I said, well, you could take, if you just want to make it fair because they believed this was a child of their own, they used some of their other investment or inheritance money to pass money on to the others as well. So it brings a little parity within the family. You know, sometimes we don't include people, but it leaves a little trouble behind. But because it was also tax sensitive, they just shared the money through to the next 2. Very common in today's world, wouldn't you agree? Step families, blended families. By the way, if they're adopted, they're treated exactly the same as if they're a blood child. Stepchildren have to be specifically named. And child 4, the youngest, has been out of work for 2 years. He's married but never had children. He has no disclaimer option because the estate said in the bloodline, if he disclaimed, his money went to the other 3. And I'm sure with counseling, they would have been fine with it. The other 3 would have gladly taken that extra money, right? However, because he's been out of work so long, he could just cash the whole thing in now. He paid a little bit of tax. He's working. He started working in the fall. And next year, he'll be back up to $70,000+ a year. And his wife's working. So next year and the next 15 years, they'll be paying much more tax. And their unique circumstance provided them an opportunity to cash it in. Not a one of the 4 of them took the inherited option to spread it out over their lifetime and the next for multiple reasons. They had plenty of other money. They had a disclaimer option. And do they really want to figure out the distributions on that small amount for 2 generations when they have other monies to deal with? They just decided they'd cash it in and use it, and they still did it in a very tax-sensitive way.